The lantern swung wild in Ethan Crow's hand as he pulled open the barn door. But the scream that tore through the December wind stopped him cold. Not an animal. A child. He'd lived alone on this Montana ridge for 8 years, and in all that time, not a soul had crossed his land uninvited. Now someone was out there in the blizzard, small and terrified, and every instinct in his battered heart told him to turn away before the world could ruin him again. But Ethan Crow had never been good at the easy choice. 3 days earlier, the sky over Bent Creek had been clear and bitter. Ethan rode into town with a wagon of split cedar, his shoulders broad enough to block the sun, his bearded face set in the kind of silence that made storekeepers nervous. He sold the wood, bought flour and lamp oil, and was halfway back to his wagon when he heard the commotion outside the land office. A man in a wool coat and polished boots stood arguing with the clerk. Beside him, a girl no older than 12 sat on a trunk, her dark hair tangled, her dress too thin for the cold. Her hands were folded tight in her lap, and her eyes were fixed on the frozen mud. "I'm telling you, I can't take her," the man said, his voice sharp with annoyance. "My wife won't have it. The girl's got no kin, no means. She's county responsibility now." The clerk shuffled papers. "We don't have facilities for orphans, Mr. Dalton. Nearest mission's in Missoula, and that's a week's travel in good weather." "Then put her on the next stage. Stage don't run till spring." The girl's shoulders drew inward, like she was trying to disappear. Ethan should have kept walking. He had firewood to stack and a storm coming. But something about the way she sat there, silent, braced for the next blow, made his chest tighten. He crossed the street. "What's her name?" The men turned. The clerk's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Ethan's size, the rough bulk of him filling the doorway. Dalton stepped back. "Lucy Brennan," the clerk said carefully. "Her folks died of fever 2 weeks back. No family left." Ethan looked at the girl. She glanced up briefly, her eyes dark and guarded, then dropped her gaze again. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just waited for the world to decide what would happen to her next. "I'll take her," Ethan said. Dalton blinked. "You? I got a house. Land. She won't starve." The clerk frowned. "Mr. Crow, the law requires proper guardianship arrangements. Then write it up." There was a long silence. Dalton looked relieved. The clerk looked uncertain. But in a town with no orphanage and winter closing in, no one was inclined to argue with a man willing to shoulder the burden. Lucy spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "I can work." Ethan crouched down so his eyes were level with hers. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her young face, the way her hands trembled despite her rigid posture. "You don't owe me work, girl. You just need a place to sleep and food to eat. That's all." She stared at him, searching his face for the lie. He didn't look away. 20 minutes later, her trunk was loaded in his wagon, and Lucy sat beside him as they rolled out of Bent Creek. She didn't speak. Ethan didn't press. The silence between them was careful, wary, two strangers bound by circumstance, not choice. The cabin sat high on a wooded ridge, built from hand-hewn logs and chinked with river clay. It was solid, clean, and utterly isolated. Ethan carried Lucy's trunk inside and set it by the small room off the main hall. The room had a narrow bed, a wool blanket, and a window facing the pines. "This is yours," he said. "Door's got a latch on the inside. You lock it if you want." Lucy stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. "Why?" "So you know you're safe." Her eyes filled, but she blinked hard and turned away before the tears could fall. Ethan left her alone and went to start supper. That first night, she barely ate. She sat at the table, her spine straight, her hands folded, and answered his questions in whispers. Yes, she could. Read. No, she didn't have other clothes. Her parents had been homesteaders south of town. The fever took them fast. Ethan listened, his own memories stirring like ghosts. He'd lost people too. He knew what it was to be hollowed out by grief. After supper, Lucy went to her room and closed the door. Ethan heard the latch slide into place. He sat by the fire, staring into the flames, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. Outside, the first snow began to fall. The blizzard hit on the third night. It came down the mountain like a living thing, howling through the pines and piling snow against the cabin walls. Ethan woke to the sound of the wind tearing at the shutters and the crash of something heavy in the barn. He pulled on his coat and boots, grabbed the lantern, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a fist. He pushed through knee-deep drifts toward the barn, his breath freezing in his beard. Inside, one of the horses was spooked, kicking at the stall. Ethan calmed the animal, checked the latch, and was turning to leave when he heard it. A thin, desperate cry barely audible over the wind. He froze. Listened. It came again. High-pitched. Terrified. Ethan shoved the barn door open and followed the sound. 50 yards from the barn, half buried in a snowdrift near the fence line, he found her. Lucy. She was curled on her side, her nightdress soaked through, her lips blue. Her eyes were open but unfocused, and she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered like stones. Ethan dropped to his knees and scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing. He pressed her against his chest, shielding her from the wind, and ran back to the cabin. Inside, he kicked the door shut and carried her straight to the fire. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, then knelt beside her, rubbing her frozen hands between his own massive palms. Lucy, Lucy, look at me. Her eyes found his, wide and glassy with fear. What were you doing out there? His voice was rough, almost angry, but his hands were unbearably gentle. She tried to speak. Her teeth chattered too hard. Finally, she managed. I thought you'd send me away. Like Mr. Dalton. I thought, if I left first, it wouldn't hurt. Ethan's heart cracked open. He pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin, and his voice came out raw. I'm not sending you anywhere, Lucy. You hear me? This is your home, long as you want it. She broke then. The tears came in shaking sobs, and Ethan held her while she cried, his broad hand cradling the back of her head. He didn't tell her to stop. He didn't tell her to be strong. He just held her until the storm inside her finally quieted. When she could breathe again, he made her drink hot broth and dressed her in dry wool socks and his own flannel shirt, which hung on her like a tent. Then he sat beside her by the fire, keeping watch while she slept. In the weeks that followed, the cabin changed. Ethan built Lucy a proper wardrobe and sewed her 2 dresses from sturdy canvas and wool. He taught her to split kindling, to track deer, to read the weather in the clouds. She was quick and hungry to learn, and she never complained. But she was also watchful. She flinched when he moved too fast. She asked permission for everything. She still latched her door at night. One afternoon, Ethan came in from the woodpile to find Lucy scrubbing the floor on her hands and knees, her face pale with exhaustion. He set down the axe. What are you doing? Earning my keep. I told you. I know what you told me. Her voice cracked. But people don't just give things, Mr. Crow. They don't. There's always a price. Ethan crossed the room and crouched beside her. Lucy, look at me. She did, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. Not work. Not gratitude. Not a damn thing. You're here because you deserve to be safe and cared for. That's all. But what if you change your mind? I won't. Everyone does. Ethan's jaw tightened. He thought of his own past. The wife and infant son he'd lost to scarlet fever 9 years ago. The way grief had driven him into these mountains to escape the unbearable weight of love and loss. He'd built this life to be alone, to never risk his heart again. But this girl, with her fierce, wounded eyes and her desperate need to be worth something, she'd cracked him open without even trying. Lucy, he said, his voice thick. I lost people I loved. I know what it is to be afraid of losing again. But you're not a burden. You're not a debt. You're just a kid who deserves a chance. Her face crumpled. She leaned forward, and Ethan caught her, holding her tight while she cried into his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Ethan Crow felt something other than the ache of absence. He felt hope. Spring came slow to the Montana high country, but when it arrived, it brought green meadows and rivers running fast with snowmelt. Lucy had been with Ethan for 5 months, and the cabin no longer felt like a place he haunted. It felt like a home. She still latched her door most nights, but some mornings Ethan woke to find her sitting by the fire, reading one of his old books, her feet tucked under her. She smiled now, small, cautious smiles, but real ones. And she'd started calling him Ethan instead of Mr. Crow. One afternoon in late April, a rider came up the trail. Ethan stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, and watched a man in a clean suit dismount. It was the county clerk from Bent Creek. Mr. Crow, the clerk said, removing his hat. I need to speak with you. Lucy appeared in the doorway, her face going pale. Ethan glanced back at her. Stay inside. She didn't move. The clerk cleared his throat. There's been an inquiry. A woman in Billings, distant cousin of the Brennans. She's petitioning for custody of the girl. Says she's the rightful kin. Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. Lucy's got a home here. I understand. But the law favors blood relatives. The hearing's set for next month. You'll need to appear. After the clerk left, Lucy stood frozen in the doorway. She doesn't want me, she whispered. She just wants my parents' land claim. Ethan knelt in front of her. Then we'll fight it. How? You're not my father. You're not even family. Maybe not by blood, Ethan said. But you're mine, Lucy. And I don't let go of what's mine. The hearing took place in a cramped Bent Creek courtroom. The cousin, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Colfax, sat with her lawyer, dressed in black silk. She spoke of duty and family obligation, her voice dripping with false warmth. When it was Ethan's turn, he stood, his massive frame dwarfing the witness stand. The judge, a gray-haired man named Whitmore, looked him over. Mr. Crow, what exactly is your relationship to this child? I'm the man who found her with nowhere to go and gave her a home. But you have no legal claim. No, sir. Just a moral one. Mrs. Colfax's lawyer sneered. Your Honor, this man is a recluse with no wife, no family. He's utterly unsuitable. I've got a house, Ethan interrupted, his voice steady and hard. I've got land, livestock, and clean water. I've taught her to read, to work, to stand on her own. She's fed, clothed, and safe. That woman didn't even know Lucy existed till she heard about the land claim. The courtroom went silent. Judge Whitmore turned to Lucy. Miss Brennan, do you wish to go with Mrs. Colfax? Lucy stood. Her voice was small but clear. No, sir. I want to stay with Ethan. Why? She looked at Ethan, and her eyes filled. Because he's the first person who ever made me feel like I mattered. Not because of what I could do or what I owned. Just because I was there. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Mrs. Colfax. Your petition is denied. Custody remains with Mr. Crow, contingent on a formal guardianship arrangement. Mrs. Colfax's face twisted in fury, but the gavel had already fallen. Outside the courthouse, Lucy threw her arms around Ethan's waist. He wrapped her in a bear hug, lifting her off the ground, and for the first time in 9 years, Ethan Crow laughed. A deep, rumbling sound of pure relief. That summer, Ethan expanded the cabin. He built Lucy a larger room with a desk and bookshelves. He taught her to ride and shoot and track game. And slowly, carefully, she began to heal. One evening, as the sun set over the ridge, Lucy sat beside Ethan on the porch. Do you ever miss them? She asked quietly. Your wife and son? Every day, Ethan said. But I've learned something, Lucy. Missing them doesn't mean I can't love again. It just means my heart's big enough for both. Lucy leaned against his shoulder. I'm glad you found me. Me too, kid. Me too. Years later, when Lucy Brennan Crow graduated from the Territorial Teachers College and returned to Bent Creek to open the first school. On the ridge, the whole town came to the dedication. And standing in the back, his arms crossed and his eyes bright with pride, was the rough giant who had built her a home, not a cage. Ethan Crow had given her safety when the world had offered none. And in return, she had given him something he thought he'd lost forever, a reason to hope, to build, and to love again.